So what's your name?
My name is Dan Bigg.
And what was your first experience in harm reduction?
That's a tough one, I mean, I think my first experience was through my mother. My mother, I think, was a harm reductionist at heart. So, kind of a practicalist. And she taught my brothers and I to live a good life, one where we treated others like we want to be treated, and the golden rule and so forth. And I think that was the first real exposure to harm reduction.
And so what was your first experience to syringe exchange?
Well, I was working in a outpatient methadone treatment program 30 years ago, and HIV came to this program, like it did many places.
And where was this?
This is in Chicago.
Okay.
And I learned what would prevent HIV among people injecting, and that at that time was bleach. The teach and bleach thing going on in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And the idea that bleach wouldn't be available to places is ridiculous. So some folks and I started printing up some labels and getting buckets to injection rooms and stuff like this. And but really, very early, it became about clean syringes. And I learned about HIV with the people I was seeing in treatment, and I started to understand it. I remember the first things is understanding the difference between PCP and angel dust, PCP being pneumocystis pneumonia, and I always thought they were talking about angel dust. That was the first thing I attended. I think it was like '83 in DC. But basically, some people who I met trying to get support around living with HIV in a very hostile world of 12 steps, they and I started CRA in 1990 with the idea of assisting any positive change as a person defined it for him or herself.
And so was CRA a syringe exchange, or focus on HIV prevention that happened to do syringe exchange?
Actually, we were an agency that focused on HIV and drug use issues as they came together. One of the big issues involved with that is safer injection, and so naturally syringe exchange was the first thing we did. No one was doing it, no one was willing to do it. There were people that could have done it, and it was in line with what they were doing, but they were too frightened to do it for bureaucracy's sake or whatnot. That's the University of Illinois. So we began doing syringe exchange in 1990. January of 92 we started. We thought it was legal. Illinois law in the 50s said that if you are involved with research, what you're doing is legal with syringes. There's an exemption for people. We started in January of 90. The state's attorney was stonewalling us. We just began, and in May of 92, we got a grant from the American Foundation for AIDS Research, the first one that came to Chicago, and the press reported on it, and then the state's attorney was willing to meet with us. They acknowledged what we did was research for both us and our participants, and thus was legal, and we've been doing it ever since. All the time grounding our work in the wants and needs of people injecting. Our board to this day is composed entirely of people who use the program, so we can maintain a focus on people's wants and needs. And after dealing with HIV, which was relatively simple, and viral hepatitis, making bloodborne pathogens, and viral hepatitis prevention, the gold standard of safer injection, we began looking at other things. And one of the first things people talked about wanting to impact is overdose, because it was claiming more lives than anything else, growing very rapidly in the 90s. And then John Zeiler, one of the founders, and the gentleman who came up with the notion of recovery as any positive change, which is the cornerstone of CRA, he died of an overdose in May of 1996. And as a result of that, we had talked about overdose. We had to put it in our naloxone in our safer injection guide and various other things, but we hadn't started distributing it. For me, that was reason enough to start distributing it, and we began to do that in the early fall of 1996. And there were some physician friends of mine that thought it was a good idea, and we've been doing it ever since.
So let's back up a little. So what was CRA's first needle exchange site?
Our first site was every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. at 68th and Halsted on the south side of Chicago.
And were you the first, for lack of a better term, organized needle exchange?
Yes.
In Chicago?
Yes.
And did you grow past that site?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the first year we grew to 4 sites.
Okay. And did you primarily focus on like the central part of Chicago?
We focused on the areas where there were a very heavy street presence of people injecting. And that was Inglewood on the south side, that was Humboldt Park on the near northwest side, that was Uptown and the north side. So those 3 areas, were the primary places that we started.
And so then you kind of fast forward to 96, and your co-founder passes away. What did it mean to you to hand out your first vial of Narcan?
Well, I remember the guy to this day. He's a gentleman that tapes his glasses together because they're always falling apart. He's got them in various states of duct tape. He's a sweetheart of a guy, committed drug user, and I told him about it, and he said, "This stuff is great." He said, "This is the same stuff they fuck us with on the ambulance, but you don't have to fuck somebody." He said, "You can just give a shot and people can gently wake up." And he was just bamboozled. Our docs thought, for the street, why not use a CC in the muscle, 0.4 milligrams. It's gentle onset, effective action, simple, easy peasy to give. And so that's what we suggested. Within a few weeks, he came back just ecstatic. This is a guy that was, very low key. He was ecstatic this one day. He said, my buddy and I were watching TV. Upstairs, the landlord's apartment, she uses every once in a while, we heard a thunk on the floor, on the ceiling. We went up there. No one answered her apartment. We knocked in the door. She was lying blue on the ground. We hit her with the naloxone, woke her up. So that was the first reversal that I ever heard about. And that guy, he still thinks it's... I told him, we don't know about the legality and whatnot. We're just doing it because it's the right thing. To this day, someone has come to visit, and he was there, and I said, "Yeah, tell him about the naloxone." He says, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." Like he was trying to protect the program. Yeah. So that kind of nature, people respecting it and wanting to protect it, typified the early beginnings of this. I spoke publicly about our program. I think we had reached, around 100 people at most. At the International Harm Reduction Conference in Paris in the spring of '97, and I spoke about it publicly, and people were amazed that we were doing it. And I remember Ernie Drucker called after I submitted the abstract to the conference, and he said, "You're doing this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're really doing this?" I said, "Yeah." So went there, and I gave a speech with the panel talking about overdose, I think. And I remember Pat O'Hara invited questions, and I think actually his first question was, what advice would you give to physicians about doing this? And I said, do your fucking job. I'm not a doctor, I have no right to prescribe, but this medicine should be in the hands of everyone that's at risk. And a bunch of people applauded. I think at least one physician in the audience committed themselves to hate me for the rest of my life.
So when you started doing Narcan, you did it at all sites?
Oh yeah. Well, initially it was where I was. And then, as the people I was working with got comfortable with what I was doing and I could kind of programatize it, I shared it with my colleagues and peers and, everyone else.
Do you know about, that first year's... Do you know how many lives were saved or how many vials you gave out?
I was thinking the first year, so from 96 to 97, late 96 to late 97, I'm guessing we reached around 200 people. And I probably heard maybe, 18 to 25 reports of reversals. And
in those early days, did the police give you any problems?
Never a problem with the police.
Or
the worst that happened is someone would be arrested, the police would find a vial on them and they'd say, "What is this?" They uncovered a pharmacy robbery or something. And they'd say, "They just gave it to me to prevent overdose." and the cop would call a friend in the emergency room and say, "What is this stuff?" He says, "That just prevents overdose. That's like garlic to the opiate users. Heroin. You don't want. No one wants that." And so it gives it back, just to save lives. The cops really weren't obstructing on it. A few really bad cops wanted some of their own because they wanted to say, "You don't use heroin, do you?" I said, "No. Let me inject you just to prove it."
Yeah.
You know, that kind of shit. But never had anyone arrested and charged with naloxone possession. Because I guess the police realized it was a positive thing. For 13 years we operated without any specific laws allowing that. Never been a problem.
And that's from 96 on.
96 on, yeah.
All right.
Well, in January 1st, 2010, we had a state law which specifically addressed it and specifically decriminalized what someone could have assumed was criminal. But we have a special law in Illinois, the Controlled Substances Act in Illinois specifically exempts naloxone and other opioid antagonists. So from the moment some police looked at it, they'd say, "This is exempted. This is not something I can charge somebody with."
Yeah. Were you a one-for-one needle exchange when you started?
When we first started, we were. It was very simple because in every neighborhood we started in, there were syringes littered everywhere. So say just, pick some up. Like I remember on 68th and Halsted, there was a garage there with some drywall, and there were 500 syringes stuck in the drywall. I said, just go and grab a handful of those, put them in the bucket here, and I'll give them to you. And first guy, he comes back with a handful, and he's looking around. We have a little bucket, like a 5-gallon paint bucket. And he dropped them in there, and then I gave him the syringes, a couple bags of syringes, and he said, "Oh, thank you." And then he kind of backed away, not turning his back to me, looking around, waiting for like the cops to come and get him, and then he ran down the street. So, but after appearing there, every Saturday, 1 to 3 for 6 months, a year, 2 years, people got pretty confident that we were not there to do anything but help. So the cops the cops would come by, and even before we had the specific exemption from the state's attorney, and they would see me. I remember I turned around once to have some syringes, and this patrol car was there. She says, "What you doing?" I said, "We're doing syringe exchange." She says, "Oh, okay." Yeah. So they came up and asked some of us if we were professional victims to be hanging out at 68th and Halsted because it was a pretty rough area. But it worked very well, and we learned lessons about doing this efficiently and, most importantly, respectfully, and avoiding all the things. People say, "Okay, you're here to help. Any positive change? I want to get into treatment." "Oh, okay. Oh, well, happy to help you." "And I really don't want to." "Well, you don't have to. It's an option. We're always willing to help with." But the treatment system was not so great then. It's even worse now. So any positive change, as a person defines it for him or herself, is pretty instructive to those that don't know it. But it's hard. It's new. People would say, everyone would profess to quit. Chicago recovery. As soon as they see recovery, they'd say, "Oh yeah, I want to stop." And then push comes to shove, they'd say, "I really don't want to stop." But I thought you might want to hear that.
Yeah. Do you think your participants and the people kind of you serve are like your most valuable asset?
Of course. I mean, every asset CRA has is in the knowledge and practices of our participants. Nothing can happen positive without them. In guidance before it starts, in quality control as it goes on. Our board members make 5 site visits between each board meeting and produce a report on what they experienced and what could do to improve it and what they liked about it. So we keep a pretty good focus on that. And actually, when every once in a while a problematic volunteer or staff will appear who's not really in that in that respectful philosophy, and they get kind of inched out slowly but surely. So even if there isn't some kind of dramatic firing or whatever, people realize that the only way to hang around with CRA is to be respectful.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, people don't want you there.
So Are you 1 for 1 today, or did you?
No,
change
no,
it?
no. We changed early on to 2 for 1. For the first, we found out around 20-some% of people were injecting 1 shot, 1 syringe with 1 for 1. Our participants encouraged a more generous thing. We asked about it, and they okayed a 2 for 1 for the first 10, and then 1 for 1 thereafter. So someone could get an additional 10 each visit. The number of people having enough syringes jumped up to the 40%, and then we changed that a year or so later to need-based, and we'd simply say, how many do you need for yourself and the people around you? And that made a huge difference. So in the 80% of people were having enough syringes. So that was critical, basically negotiating up. How many do you want? 100? Okay. How about 200? Okay. How about 300? No, 200 is okay. So that, as soon as they, limited it, we went. But we'd go up as high as someone wanted.
And what year did you start that?
I think it was, but let's see, I think the Harvard Action Conference in Toronto was in 94. So somewhere around 95, I think.
Okay, so you did that before you gave out Narcan.
Yeah, 94, 95.
Okay. And you found it to be a more ethical...
Yeah, I mean, it was more consistent with what we were trying to do. People, made good use of the syringes. No one was wasting them.
Yeah.
And they were helping others, being very altruistic. And we realized real quick that the majority of people we're impacting we never saw. So we realized that, you can actually increase someone's risk if you don't give them enough syringes.
And then around 96 you got handed out Narcan. And are you using the vans by then?
Oh yeah, we started that in 93.
So 93 you describe these vans, because I think you're the only one in the country that really uses the vans in a way.
Really? Well, they're just like UPS trucks, large, so there's plenty of place to go inside. People were saying they wanted to get off the street so people didn't know their business. People come in for a lot of different reasons. Participate in a research study, get condoms, safer injection stuff. So get tested. So there's a lot of reasons people would come in the van, and it became much safer for people to come there because they didn't have to put their business out there, as folks said.
Yeah.
That was a gift from the Comer Foundation, our first van.
Okay. And what'd you name it?
Well, we call our vans the Vehicles for Positive Change. So that was Vehicle for Positive Change 1.
And what are you up to now?
6. And actually, we're Vehicle for Positive Change 1 or 2, I forget. 1 we sold to Detroit. 2 we're going to give to a program in southern Indiana to get started with this. They decided that they wanted to do that. So.
Oh, that's amazing. And so what are kind of like, so we passed 96, we're giving out Narcan. Like, what are some of the changes that happen from there?
As far as the practice of outreach?
Yeah, or practice, or is it just more sites, or what's the formula?
Oh yeah, we were starting more sites all the time. More resources, more sites, and people would tell us, right now we have like 10 or 12 places, people are saying it would be great to start. A place, for instance, we drive the van and just park it there, unannounced, for 2 hours, we'll see 40 people who are looking for safer injection stuff. So there's, the resources have been cut back 54% over the last 6 or 7 years. So success breeds financial antagonism, unfortunately. And since HIV was the only thing that was funding us, and we piled everything else on top of that, hepatitis prevention, overdose prevention, vaccination, everything else, it was, those things get shorted too. When HIV, it may be somewhat sensible to fund, to send less resources on funding by, what is 3 times more effective intervention in syringe exchange, but because there's less HIV among people injecting, but all those other things got shorted as well. So it's a challenging time because there's no funding for hepatitis prevention. There's no funding for overdose prevention. We receive no funding for vaccination.
And you guys do vaccination?
Yeah.
Do you have a clinic in all your vans?
I don't know what you mean, clinic.
But I mean, like vaccinations.
Yeah, we do HIV testing, syphilis testing, chlamydia, gonorrhea testing. We do rapid hepatitis C testing. We do vaccination with influenza, and then whatever vaccine we get, which is usually always hepatitis B. We were getting Twinrix for a while, which we really liked. No more. And meningitis, pneumococcal, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, whatever we can get.
So, tell me more about this. You have given out millions of syringes in the city of Chicago. You are wildly successful. You've, correct me if I'm wrong, have shown that people use less with need-based services. You have lots of
Also, more likely to clean up the community and shorten the circulation time between taking a syringe and bringing it back.
Yeah. So City of Chicago and Cook County gives you millions of dollars because
City of Chicago,
because you've proven yourself.
I mean, not each year, but over the years, yeah.
No, but I mean, like because you've been showing yourself to be so proven, they've clearly.
Yeah, they've definitely supported it since '92. The city.
Yeah, and what do you think the biggest barriers in those days were?
In those days, some stupid city employees. There was a director of HIV prevention once who said, "I'll support syringe exchange when Bishop Brazier on 63rd and Dorchester supports syringe exchange." And I said, "Lydia, your job is HIV prevention for the health department. Bishop Brazier has other activities. Why would you base what you do on what he does?" And that was just where she was coming from. Okay. She later tried to become the AIDS director of the District of Columbia, and that was a huge mistake.
Yeah. So, as a state, you said that you've taken 54% cuts. Is that from day one, or is it in the last 10 years?
Yeah, mostly in the last 10 years.
Okay, and why is that?
Because HIV has lessened among people injecting. Turns out that the epidemiological studies done in Chicago show that injectors have been responsible for a 63% reduction in HIV transmission. The next closest group is heterosexual female African Americans who showed a 20-some% reduction. So it's 3 times more effective than the next closest HIV prevention measure. But still, because it is effective, they started funding it less.
And do you guys give out smoking kits or support?
When we have them, we do. We make everything available. Whether it's the caps that cover the glass, or rubber bands, even, or pipes. Meth is not so commonly smoked in Chicago, so we have never been asked for those. Crack pipes, yes, and we have those from time to time. Greg Scott is usually the one that rounds those up. But anytime we get that stuff, we give it out. So, food, clothes, whatever we have to make available to people, we do.
And you don't really have like what someone would call a brick and mortar traditional site. We have
a couple offices in Chicago, in Englewood and North Lawndale, and we operate out of there. But we mostly operate out of specific sites with the vans in the city of Chicago. And as we get outside the city of Chicago, we usually operate under cell phone access.
Okay. And so what would you think was your biggest success in your time at CRA?
I would say that the biggest success is changing the attitude towards people who are using drugs from hostile to the city and worthy of arresting and incarcerating to key players in health promotion.
And what do you think your biggest failure was?
Just having insufficient resources to do everything that we need to do.
And so when did CRA start?
We started our first outreach in January of '92.
So you're getting close to 25 years.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for the next 25 years?
Oh, well, I would love to see resources come for everything that we do accomplish. Overdose prevention makes a huge difference. We've never received a penny of funding from that locally. Viral hepatitis prevention. I mean, getting people tested and treated, confirmed and treated is hugely important, possible, and we're not doing it.
Do you think there's a question that I haven't asked about the history?
No, I mean, other than the philosophy that, of any positive change, which is, the cornerstone of what we do, that kind of is the revolution that John developed. John just came into this, we were going to try to define recovery, and John came in with that notion, and no one could improve on it. It was just perfect. So, that's just really a wonderful moment that stays with me to this day, and I think is responsible for everything positive that's happened to us.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What does that mean to you?
Well, recovery, people defined it a million different ways, but the definition that makes the most sense to me and is the most consistent with my philosophy as well is a person knowing, as an adult, knowing what they want, what improvement would mean to them. Not about perfection, not about arriving at a place of perfection or ultimate nirvana. It's about positive change in your life, and it applies to everyone. It's not something you can stigmatize one person about, because it applies to everyone. God forbid the person that it doesn't apply to. They have no positive changes they can make. Get me out of their presence immediately, because they're insufferable. But that, I think, is what the challenge is really about. Everyone has positive changes they can make in their lives, and so everyone who comes to CRA benefits from doing the work and practicing that philosophy.
And why did you start CRA?
Well, with some friends, we wanted to go from self-support, which we were doing, to action and advocacy. So this is how we did it.
Okay. And did you, CRA and advocacy, what kind of projects have they done?
Well, mostly it's about changing giving people who are injecting a voice, giving them credit for what they accomplish, and sharing that power, with anyone who will listen, the city, other granting places, foundations, whatnot. This is a really valuable avenue that people know the answers, the solutions to their own problems, and if you listen and use their expertise, we pay for it, you can benefit from it. And CRA has benefited just from listening. So that's really one of the big lessons involved. So continuing to do that is critically important.
And do you think that CRA has a place in the whole harm reduction history, or do you think they were just another group that kind of appeared where they saw a problem?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we're just another group to appear, but the thing that I think most helped us contribute to the philosophy of harm reduction in the United States is the philosophy of any positive change. I think people couldn't get it, they didn't get it. What is recovery? People would have maybe continued to buy into recovery as being so much period of abstinence. And that there's such a tyranny in that would have strangulated the movement. And I've been told this by many, many people, it's a genius and revolutionary. And again, it's John Zeiler's genius. Whenever I say that to somebody or somewhere and it appears in print or whatever, and his daughters, he has 2 daughters, they read it, they always thank me to remembering their dad. And, it's true, he came up with it, and I can't improve upon it to this day. It's a guiding principle for all of us.
And how many founders were of CRA?
There were around a dozen people that started it.
And are any of them still around?
That's a good question. 3 are still around. 3 are still alive, I should say. I'm one, and 2 others are still alive.
Yeah.
Everyone else is dead. Mostly from HIV.
Yeah, I think people forget that, there was a time where people were coming to the exchange and then you just wouldn't see them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a painting I made to somewhere around 20 people that I lost at one point, and it's like another world now. When I see someone from the old times, like Kinsley, Kinsley been around for a long time, and Robert Heimer, and Dave Purchase, and some others. It's just amazing that that time even existed. and all those people that came before that are not here at these conferences and stuff. It's always a sad thing to realize. And like when I was going to Southern Indiana to help out there recently, as we drove down I-65 South, John and I, John hadn't really been there in the heart of it. He certainly lived through it from the side of someone who was using it at the time, but he can't point to 36 people he's lost, who were close friends. But as we drove there, I was thinking, I'm going into the belly of the beast again, the old HIV world where people died and whatnot. And then I got down there, and it wasn't like that. It was that they had good treatments now. The people in the state of Indiana, the state health department, the local medical clinic and stuff, they were ready, willing to help and provide good treatments, so it didn't have to be the death sentence it was back then. And that was very different, so I was glad to experience that. Because I was kind of emotionally, I was very worried about that, what my reaction to that would be, but I didn't find it to be the same. That helplessness and death that came with that.
Yeah, that it is something that, like, I kind of got on the tail end of that. So it kind of is interesting. Yeah. Do you have anything else you need to say?
Not that I can think of.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.